Hello everyone and welcome back to the Crucible for our third match of the night. I'm joined again by Goose and Sirius. Goose, how are you feeling about tonight?
I'm feeling really great. We have the very first matchup for a player that a lot of you may know. A lot of you have been asking the same question of when does Stompin play? And the answer is right now. Bandscoast is a very hot team. Even aside from Stompin, having both Aiden Tax, Lou, Vic Bands, and Franklin, this is a team that is very heavy on just the raw mechanical skills. Still somewhat new to competitive Siege with this roster, obviously having some players who played in the T3 scene before, but you're going to see a lot of those mistakes come from a lot of just, inexperience from this roster. Obviously, adding Merc to the roster as a coach is a phenomenal add-on, giving a lot of individual experience and just experience as a whole of leading this team and just building them up, especially with such a young and great talent as Stompin, who, keep in mind, is only 17th.
All right, well, it sounds like this team, like many of the others in our league, this group is looking to establish their identity. So hopefully they can do a good job at laying some more of that groundwork tonight. But let's also look at their opponents. Sirius, can you tell us a little bit more about Slime Belief? I know we just watched them play, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on them.
I mean, they absolutely dominated 1 HP on console. It was not even a remotely close contest, even when it looked like it was going in 1 HP's favor, because countless time after time, just man disadvantaged situations for Slime Belief, and yet they somehow managed to come back in almost every single one of them. Only dropped a single round, and it's just, I don't know what else to say. They played a lot more reserved than what you would normally see out of a kind of more recent addition to Tier 3 Siege, because this is only 2/5 of the Garage Talks roster that was in Element 4, and that's just Thomas and Uzi, who Uzi just absolutely killed in that game, having a 1v5 ace clutch against them, and it's just absolutely ridiculous what this team can do.
Yeah, for sure. I think the name of the game with Slime Belief is the clutch potential. So you have that against a team that's trying to kind of establish their identity. And honestly, Goose, who do you think is going to win it tonight? What's your prediction without jinxing anyone?
It is a really difficult position because through quals we saw Slime Belief play very aggressive, but in their best of one on console against 1 HP, they played relatively slow, and if they play exactly like that up against Bandscoast, which is a team that is uber aggressive, really relies on teams, especially when they're attacking against a very slow defensive team, on them being slow to make decisions, allowing for them to adapt. And if they don't have a lot of problems on their attack thrown at them, then they kind of just run in and kill people. So that's going to be the main thing of just giving Bandscoast a lot of different problems throughout the round when they're attacking to simply deal with, to try and trip them up.
Yeah, for sure. And as we are looking into these map bans coming out here, Sirius, can you tell us any trends that you're noticing or any predictions based on the maps that we're seeing being banned?
I mean, nothing really too crazy. I mean, Consulate is still up on the board, so we may see a repeat of that once again. It's actually just snuck all the way through to the very end, actually being banned out by Bandscoast. Obviously, probably seeing that result that against 1 HP and doesn't want to repeat that. But going to Bank, another map where if Slime Belief continue to play as slow as they did on Consulate against 1 HP, that could be a really big boon for them, especially since they're starting on defense once again. Because like Goose said, they've started off very slow. It's not very typical pug stack kind of style. So just overall, kind of just need to slow down Bandscoast, because this is a team that, while they don't have a great overall strategic depth to the game, they have very good mechanical skill that kind of helps make up for that. So they can overpower a lot of these defenses, make sure that they can get in, take these fights, and just overall overpower a lot of these guys. And just, it's going to be a tough fight for Slime Belief if they don't account for that.
Yeah, and on top of it, coming right off of their game right before this, I feel like it can be a lot of a mental drain. We saw that last night with Core having that first match followed immediately by a second overtime match. Obviously, the first match that Slime Belief played today didn't go nearly as long with such a decisive victory. But kind of looking at how their momentum, they're still riding that high from winning the previous game, but, do they have the stamina to continue into a second game right after? What are you guys' any last thoughts on this game? Sirius, what about your predictions?
I mean, considering how fast that last game went, I don't really think that stamina is going to be much of a factor for Slime Belief, because that was just kind of like, all right, that's it. We're already done. Moving on to the next game series. I mean, Thomas before was just like, how are we going to do map bans while we're in the middle of this game? And all right, well, our game's already done. Just breeze right through the map ban phase for this game too. So it's ultimately just, they're still riding off that high momentum that they built up against 1 HP, so I'm imagining that they're going to be able to do that against a Bandscoast who has had time to study them, see what they can do, and then overall just kind of see what they can work against them. And Goose, I'm just wondering, is there anything that they can do against Slime Belief if they continue to play as well as they did against 1 HP?
I think the number one thing they have to focus on is just finding some success. In previous matchups, and one of the big problems you'll notice for Bandscoast is they haven't really been tested. The only real test they've had was in the Element 4 group stage, which they did eventually go out 2-3. But if Bandscoast is able to find a consistent answer, especially, again, these attacks are going to be very important, whether it be just simply finding a way for Stompin to get kills or trying to maybe double up on isolated players. They need to make sure that they try and spot gaps in what Slime Belief is doing before they're able to realize that they've already made the mistake.
Yeah, so kind of building off of that, do you think that there is anything we saw from Bandscoast? I struggle with that name. Do you think that there's anything that we've seen from them previously that will give them an edge over Slime Belief tonight? I mean, obviously they're still a newer roster. Is there anything that they might have a surprise waiting for Slime Belief?
Oh, as you can see by the smile on my face, I have the exact answer for you, and that answer is Bank. This is a map that they've played the most, even actually beating Up Next 7-2 in the qualifier for this event. And going all the way back to the TPL Winter Series, it was a map that throughout their two best of threes before they played Packers Pugstack team is they just curb stomp teams. And it's kind of a situation where I was kind of curious on why teams keep taking Bandscoast to Bank, because they're nearly flawless on it, and I really do think this may be a mistake from Slime Belief of not really testing that map pool that more than likely, in theory, in my opinion, is a little bit small for Bandscoast.
Okay, so you're thinking that the map will give them the advantage. What do you think could be the repercussions, per se, if Slime Belief breaks their streak on Bank and it makes their already smallish map pool even smaller? Do you think that could make it so they don't want to tank Bank anymore, or do you think they'll learn from it and be able to grow more?
I hope, yeah, especially since this team is so new and they're learning so much, that they'll take it as a sense of, we just need to expand our map pool. I think that is one of their bigger problems, especially because they haven't been tested against better teams, which in turn will have those bigger map pools. And if this is that matchup that they do lose, that does essentially, send a wake-up call, then so be it. And if they do win it, they continue to stride on. And I think no matter what win or loss, this will be a great result for Bandscoast.
Okay, so it almost sounds like we've got a little bit of an underdog story being built right now. We've got Slime Belief, who is still running off that high. They just won 7-1 against Up Next, and they are, sorry, not one Up Next, 1 HP. And they are looking to keep that momentum rolling versus Bandscoast, who is kind of a newer team. They've got some younger players, but some gunners, very mechanically skilled. What do you think, Sirius, are the odds of us seeing some spawn peaks tonight or anything?
I think it's going to be very high. I mean, overall, it's just going to be probably Killfest galore if we're talking about...
All right, well, we are ready to get into this game, so good luck, casters, and good luck to both teams, and let's get started.
Thank you. Shout out to Lumi, just picking up all the way for us. And Bandscoast against Slime Belief. Slime Belief previously, if you're now just joining us, had their very first matchup in the group stage for the Crucible, winning 7-1 against 1 HP. And if you're also now just joining us, this is Bandscoast's very first game, and essentially Stompin's very first T3 game in a league that isn't a weekend tournament. So this is going to be a very big test, and we're kind of walking our way into waters that we don't exactly know what they will contain.
I mean, that's kind of the big thing for Slime Belief, is that there's not really a whole lot to go off of, or Bandscoast. I mean, there's not a whole lot to go off of them either. But there's still the factor of just that chaos factor from Bandscoast, because They don't really have a set structure. There's not really a whole set idea other than they want to enable their gunners. They want to get in, get those kills as fast as possible, and not really be slowed down by these bogged down defensive setups. Make sure that they don't get slowed down so they can enable some quick, fast plays. So going into this bank game, they need to be aware of that because this is a big map, which does also provide some possible abilities for gap hitting, which Bandscoast does love to try to go for. So that's going to have to be Slime Belief's priority number one, is just locking things down to make sure that they know where Bandscoast is at almost all times.
Yeah, well, Bandscoast will be starting on the attack for Bank, and Bank is a little bit of a weird map, especially in the T3 realm. Obviously, if you go up to T2, it is relatively more evened out for both sides. But in T3, again, while we do see Bank, tend to favor the attack sometimes, it is more commonly relatively, I'd even say, even or more even defender sided. And again, as we spoke about in the previous matchup for Slime Belief, is that their momentum, the way that they changed in their pace, playing a lot slower compared to their qualifier games, is kind of a little bit questionable. We're not exactly sure if that was just kind of a read coming out from Thomas, being their IGL with the most experience on the team, just kind of reading into the tempo of that specific game, or if that's what they're trying to set up as their overall identity. Whether or not, we see that in this game of Bank, it's still going to test Bandscoast, especially as they're still somewhat learning a lot of their competitive fundamentals.
I mean, it would seem that Slime Belief are still kind of going to lean into that. There's going to be a lot of utility being brought out, and Thomas actually going to be trying to start us off with maybe a bit of a spawn peek through that banana window, at least tossing out that Echo drone to try to get some information on anybody out in that alleyway. Just overall, just waiting to give that info, and Zach Kill is actually going to capitalize on top of that, taking down Franklin and trying to see if he can find the other one, but he's getting pinched from two sides, still alive somehow, but takes one down with him, and Stomp and eventually gets the trade.
Yeah, that's going to be very important. Obviously, losing Zach, a very aggressive player on the defense, is going to do a whole lot for Slime Belief. But if you look over on Bandscoast, they've lost their only hard breach operator. There's no can openers on the board. The only thing you have aside from that is going to be the soft breach on the Ash from Aiden Tax and Lou with those Flores drones, but you'd rather want to use those on just getting rid of that defender utility, maybe some shields around the map. And on top of that, Vic Bands losing a lot of their health and slowing down a lot of just this pace in the very first round. It's kind of a situation where if you're Slime Belief, you're more than happy to take that one. A Rooney for a ace is a win 10 times out of 10 out of any day of the week.
I mean, because that really locks down Bandsco's potential for the later portions of the round. They can't get open that square wall besides this little bit of head holes on the very far left side, kind of closer to the janitor doorway. So that's kind of their only real pathway in from square. Now they can try to shift over, try to take care of this utility over on the lobby side, which Stompin may be a bit of a factor as he's already hearing the audio from President's office right above him. So he's going to know that a player's up there. But does he have the info and the confidence to go for that just yet? He's biding his time seemingly at the moment, as the rest of the team's still trying to take care of utility on the site. It's just taking a very long process in a situation where, with the very early kill presented to them, it is not exactly going their way.
Yeah, and on top of the Bandscoast, now with a lot of opportunities to get info on these late game positions of these defenders, you can see that just a lot of these attackers are just kind of swinging, trying to potentially bait a player out. It's Uzi and Reapas to shut down both Stompin and Lou. A prone from Aiden will not work. Uzi shutting him down. Reapers, 2 kills for both of them to shut down Bandscoast. Such an aggressive late round push towards the bomb site. We talked about that a lot, if Slime Belief was going to be able to shut that down, and that's exactly how they open up their game.
I mean, and starting off with an opening pick onto the ace was what really kind of helped enable the rest of that round for Slime Belief to just sit back so confidently, because you can't open up that janitor wall. You can't really open anywhere else, especially on the square wall, so you can't go for a late round plant nearly as easily unless you just swing in from those windows. But by that point, you have to have so many other points of contact opened up to make it to where Bandscoast can easily see all these defenders, or at least force them back further away so that way the plant can go down a lot safer. But Slime Belief took that early pressure down, took down Franklin, and made sure that Bandscoast were so limited in what they could do. Bandscoast tried to retaliate by spreading out across the map, try to come from all angles of attack, and then 3-2-1 hit the site as fast as possible. But Slime Belief, due to how close together and how much utility they still had, were able to account for that, make sure that they could shut all that down, and Bandscoast has no real option to get back into that round.
Yeah, Bandscoast, again, just really leaning into that very aggressive overall playstyle, bringing that blitz, and also Vic Band still on the board. But another problem that I've noticed is that aside from your ace, the only thing you have is can openers. This is now 2 rounds in a row where Bandscoast do not want to bring an additional hard breach operator to make it just a little bit easier. We can see that both Stompin being led by Aiden Tax on the blitz, just clearing so much map position over inside of open area. But you can notice with these Volcan canisters that this has essentially just been opened up. This has Slime Belief just welcoming them in, not really trying to contest this point of the map, forcing Bandscoast for yet again to go for that late round execution.
I mean, it definitely shuts down any very early aggressive plays, because now they have to wait for these Vulcan canisters to kind of expire, make sure that they can get these hatches open safely. They've already taken care of at least one of the Iruni gates. The one over towards that open hatch is still up in presence. They're just going to be able to send an RU at it, open it up with these hard breach canisters, and now they have the rest of the round to try to work on this site, try to open up as many avenues as possible, because that was kind of what hurt them last round, is they didn't really have many things presented to them to try to hit the site as quickly as possible. So now, minute 47, Slime Belief just kind of letting that first floor go the way of Bandscoast is definitely going to hurt, and Aiden actually taking the initiative down the blue stairs, taking down the smoke on top of that. Surprising engagement considering how powerful he normally is in that position.
Yeah, not only are you going to be able to just allow for yourself as an attacking team, just not really deal with that blue position for an extended amount of time, but also all of those smoke canisters now off the board. Aside from that, only having 2 C4s for that, long-range denial. And this is exactly what Bandscoast wants. They want to try to get this plant down. They want Aiden to try and prevent anything from coming through, and they just kind of have to bait these C4s out. With a minute still on the board, there still is plenty of time to do that, and the Grimbees will add a little bit more, but Slime Belief, they more than will be aware. Zach finally finding a response onto Stompin at that, and now a 4v4, still not being able to find the planter, but as I say that, even with a team kill, they are able to down Franklin, trying to get that bomb down. Aiden does pick up the bomb now, potentially trying to get a safer plant down with that shield on his back. Blue upstairs, somehow even downing Aiden as he gets into that position. They have to deal with this player inside of garage if they want to try and get this default plant down, but because he's so far away, they're not going to be able to spot him. Franklin, though, does find Zach, now putting Slime Belief into a very uncomfortable 2v4. Aiden just trying to get this bomb down. More than likely he will. Franklin with a double in the round. It's Vic Bands to finish it off as Bandscoast. They find a very solid answer back.
And a very good response at that, because just the fact that Slime Belief did not really assert any roaming pressure on that first floor. Bandscoast had so much time to set up whatever play they wanted. Once they finally got those walls open, got the hatches open, and dealt with all the utility that was kind of directly stopping them from going for the initial plant, they easily tried to go for that, but just the garage presence was kind of a big question mark in that round. It nearly took down 2 players and made it very difficult for them, but forcing that player back a little bit further away made sure that they could get into a safer position, watch for the cutoff angles, onto the red door, and anybody swinging into the bomb site at that point, because Zach Hilla tried to take the initiative, swing onto the planter and take him out, but good coverage from up above, and just overall presence in server made sure that he was going to be shut down immediately. So Bandscoast, very slow, very methodical in that round, just taking their time of just breaking apart that defensive setup, because Slime Belief really did not present any outward pressure there, Goose, because they just sat in sight the entire time and just hoped that that would do enough.
And that's not relatively what Bandscoast is known for. And, we've talked a lot about how, Merc is coming in the coaching role. And if you're familiar with Siege, you know how much an SI winner, especially a player who was actively playing not too long ago, less than a year ago, can add to not only a roster, but a roster that needs just a lot of that experience. And we can already see the effect Emwork is having. We can see that Bandscoast is playing a lot more reserved. They're taking a lot more time to set up their executes, taking more time to make decisions and make that first step so they don't make those first mistakes. And it's phenomenal. We can see that Stompin also playing a lot more just flexible and not going to be just sitting on that Dokkaebi for the entirety of the attack. Now going on to an Amaru position. Lou also on that Deimos more than likely will be trying to approach this top floor very early on, deal with this extension from Slime Belief, and it's Aiden tag the very first pick onto that kill, getting that a zombie now off the board.
That's a big pick too, because that really kind of helps speed up Bandscoast's attack now that they don't have nearly as many Kiba berries to take care of. And nice shutdown from Stompin to take care of Zim trying to hop out on the window. That's all of second floor now cleared by Bandscoast, and they have barely taken any damage. Lou's technically the only one, but he took only a sliver of that. Possibly just to a Gumai stepping in, trying to take care of the player in Janitor. But now, Thomas and Uzi, the two players remaining from Garage Talks, are going to have to do it all against Bandscoast. With a minute 40 left, they can easily take their time, gather as much information to just try to figure out where those last two players are, get into a position to go for a plant properly, or isolate those gunfights so that way they cannot come back from this, because we saw in their last series how easily Slime Belief can make unwinnable situations be winnable just due to how calm and collected they are.
You see that Stompin's going for a lurk over on blue stairs, and now a second round where Bandscoast have a 4v2 going in to the execution, but it's stomping right on Thomas's head, just shutting him out of the round. Now it's all up to Uzi in the 1v5. Not a whole lot of opportunities for him to deal with, in a Monty on top of that. There's not just a great chance for him, and it's Stompin with the third in the round to shut down the Legion. And now 2 unanswered picks will force Slime Belief to take their timeout just 3 rounds in.
I mean, that is a very fast, and I didn't even think that they were doing that badly to warrant an early timeout as such as this. But I mean, these last 2 rounds have been very decisive for Bandscoast, just due to the fact that they've not really had to deal with a whole lot of outward pressure from Slime Belief. So this last round was them trying to assert a little bit more of that, trying to get a little bit more aggressive on that top floor roam, but they just kind of did it all willy-nilly. They didn't have any real basis or thought behind it. It's just, oh, my teammate died over here, let me try to go refrag this. That was kind of the basis of that Frost jumping out onto Stomp and trying to desperately get that refrag in some way, somehow, but ultimately gets shut down because they're just going to have to be aware of that from Slime Belief, that Bandscoast are not a team that you can just walk over. It's not 1 HP from last map where you can kind of get away with more aggressive plays, shut down any initiation from them walking into the map, taking that map control away from you. So Bandscoast doing a very good job of just making sure that no matter what situation it is, whether it's over passivity from Slime Belief or a little bit of over aggression, they're able to shut down one either way and really make sure that they get set up very well into the last minute of the round.
And building off your point, which I agree with, we're kind of seeing Slime Belief try and meet Bandscoast when they get aggressive with aggression from their own, making sure that they force Bandscoast to get into what they think are uncomfortable entry situations early in the round. But as we spoke about in the pre-show, that's not exactly on how you want to play against Bandscoast. Bandscoast is a very mechanical-heavy team. Every single individual player can go huge at any game. There is no real player that is largely better than the other. And, not to say that Slime Belief doesn't have mechanical skill. Obviously, you have players like Zim. Uzi had a fantastic game previously. But I just don't think that's necessarily what Slime Belief need to really be doing. We're not seeing those obstacles being set up. We're not seeing Slime Belief use Bank playing off of the map itself, trying to use that defender utility to give Bandscoast a problem. And because of that, they're essentially just playing into how Bandscoast want to play.
Big thing I'm noticing so far is that whenever Slime Belief does have some bit of utility, they're not really playing around it with the whole team emphasis in mind. They're kind of sending one guy at the problem, most notably one player in Janitor last round, just having to do it all against a Monty with one Kiba barrier to really help stop their forward progress, and then everybody else was so far back. So they really need to find a way to utilize their utility to really help Bandscoast slow down a lot more. Like what we saw in round number 1, where as soon as they took care of Franklin on the ace, they had no real way to do anything else other than just try to work through all that utility. Stomping, taking down Zim, again, taking down the player with all the Kiba barriers in pocket is not going to help really slow down the pace of Bandscoast, who now have to deal with even less because of the fact that there's not going to be nearly as many throughout the round.
I mean, we talk about how a lot of the times that Bandscoast may rely on just their pure mechanical skill, but they've done a fantastic job on this attack of just getting rid of this defender utility early on, getting rid of the zombie barricades and the zombie herself, making sure she can't put any more up, and then getting rid of that janitor's closet mirror, denying that intel from Slime Belief, more importantly, Zatkilla, and then having Aiden to get an additional pick on Thomas. Just a fantastic job of just playing around the positions of Slime Belief.
Minute 30 left, and there's just not a whole lot of room left for Slime Belief to work into this round. Uzi finds 2, tries to alleviate some of that pressure. He's getting into a very forward position, trying to get somebody caught off guard. But now, Reaper, somebody, we're going over towards Marble Stairs. Reapers gets a nice shot onto Aiden as he's working his way up square. Back down to a 2v2, but there's a Monty in Uzi's face. He has no real other way to take care of this other than shoot at the feet. But now, 50 seconds left. They made this much more winnable.
There's Vic Bands to shut down Reapers, and now it's a 2v1. They have the pings on Uzi so low on health. They just need to get the swing off, and it's Vic Bands to shut it down. Even with that timeout coming from Slime Belief, it just was not enough for the pure pressure from Bandscoast, as now they take their 3rd in a row.
I mean, and again, it's just they're not really playing around their utility seemingly. They just keep overextending themselves beyond it, not really playing safe behind it, like what we saw round number 1, where it seemed like they're playing much more together, playing a little bit more close contact, to make sure that if somebody dies, there's at least a refrag to play behind it. But last couple of rounds, it's just felt like they're playing a little bit loose, playing a little bit more isolated. So as soon as one player dies, that area of map control is completely Bandscoast. There's nobody else to really help contest that, and it's all up to the rest of the players on site to kind of spread out, try to retake some of that to make sure that Bandscoast can't go forward nearly as quickly. But because of that, you leave a lot more isolated positions for Bandscoast to actually take more pressure on. We saw that with the stock player moving away, getting a little bit more isolated because he had to go over towards Marble to kind of make sure that there was no lurk coming in from Bandscoast. And then the janitor player just had to deal with a Monty straight in his face, and then everybody else is so far back they can't even remotely help him.
It really does seem like that Slime Belief just are not able to counter Bandscoast, whether it be just from simple positioning or just playing the right exact tempo and pace, and Bandscoast is eating it up. And on top of that, the fact that they're not being able to find a way to shut down Stompin', and obviously, you know, we don't want to talk about too much, but when he's just allowed to run through the map completely uncontested. Again, I understand that you want to try and force them to go for the execution, but when you can't even hold blue stairs, when you are forced to bring out this clash simply just to hold back the onslaught, it's kind of a situation where I really do think that Slime Belief just need to play more of an extension, especially on this basement bomb site.
I do like their play over towards server this time, though. Thomas on the class, as you've already mentioned, Zatkilla actually on the Warden to try to make sure that if any flashbangs do get tossed out in his direction, actually there's none on the board, but there is both the Sens ROUs, which you can't see through anymore, and the smokes from Luke. Alright, we're just gonna pass that if you didn't see anything. Whoops. But back to my original point, Zatkilla now with the Warden can kind of sit a little bit behind this server rack, make sure that it's going to be tough as possible for Bandscoast to actually get into a position in the server, clear out his position, and get into a proper execution point. Now, he can waste so much time. He can waste at least 30 seconds trying to get into this point, but he needs to stay alive in order for that to happen.
Uzi with a shutdown. Franklin getting the answer back, finally clearing out Zatkilla, and Aiden is able to finally get rid of the clash again. Clearing that blue and server position with a minute 30 left on the board. You can see that Reaper is just trying to potentially creep up those stairs. Potentially maybe could get a flank up if he is given the opportunity or shutting down a player. But again, you can see there's so much time on the clock that Bandscoast is able to just waste the utility, kind of bait out those swings, and here comes Reapers looking for an opportunity, and with no real flank watch, you do see Stompin is looking in the direction. They do get a call that he is swinging. He does get one onto Vic Bands and puts the defense in a 3v3 now. With Stompin still on the hatch, a player watching him all the way from servers. It doesn't matter. He gets the head. He gets his one, and now both Franklin and Stompin completely disconnected with 3 players to deal with in the time that 6th man for the defense is starting to click down, and they need to make a decision quickly. And with this 3-man crossfire being set up, the options are starting to wane. Franklin will try and potentially get this bomb down right before or below the bomb. Chassis Stompin is able to find Reapers. A swing out from Zim does not work. He loses his life, and now it's Uzi in a 1v2. Franklin also down with 16 seconds. Stompin will try and get the plant down, try and bait the swing. He does get the swing, but it's Uzi to win it and shut him down. And after 3 untraded rounds, a timeout, eventually, Slime Belief are able to stop the bleeding.
I mean, just talk about how good Reapers is on that garage angle. Just absolutely making a nuisance of himself for Bandscoast to actually take care of that, get into a safe lane on the default plant spot. And that really helped enable the rest of that round for Slime Belief, because again, they just weren't able to really waste so much time over towards that server side. They wasted a little bit, but then both the Clash and the Warden both died, so they can't really help out with the rest of that execute. Bandscoast are in a prime position to still get that wall open because they've taken care of the Vulcan canisters. They've got everything else that they need to get into a safe spot, but Reapers gets a couple nice shots, make it a 3v3, make it a close gunfight, and now Bandscoast have to really dive in deep to get rid of all these players because they're just sitting behind mirror windows, they're sitting safe in Gold Vault and Garage, so you have to dive in deep, take those 50-50 gunfights, and make sure that you win those. But ultimately, Reapers just gives this team a little bit of a chance, just a little bit of breathing room, even though it comes down to 1v1, just gives Slime Belief that little bit of a chance.
I also really love that play from Zim, just hiding himself behind that little desk there, trying to just add an additional factor onto this CO basement defense that Bandscoast hadn't had to deal with before. Obviously, it seems simple enough. It's just one operator change, but that one shield, that one clash can really slow down the attack. And now it's kind of a situation where Bandscoast, they're going to drone, they're going to see that clash and like, oh wait, they have a clash. We didn't know that. And it's going to kind of trip them up. This is exactly what I was speaking up about before, is you just have to deploy these small things to trip up Bandscoast, give them something new to deal with, and try and test them at every chance you get. And Zach Killa on the roam to lurk inside of basement, but with this Deimos on board, knowing exactly who is down here, it's going to be a challenge that they were more than welcome.
Oh, and he's got the Deathmark track, just waiting for his teammate to swing on contact, feeding all the intel to Aiden as he just swings in. Zach Hill only knew about the player in dirt and had no idea that Aiden was hunting him down as well. So a nice little pinch play coming in from Bandscoast, just showing that synergy that they've developed over these last few weeks. Ultimately, just making it a tough contest for that player that was just trying to rat out in the middle of servers, just wait for his opportunity to work his way up square or wherever he needed to kind of go. But now that he's dead, there's no more C4, he can't play for that late flank, and now that they spotted out this other player downstairs, it's just going to have to force him back a little bit. He's either going to go back to site or he's just going to be looking somewhere else, but they keep finding the intel onto him, and they force him all the way back to site, so he can't waste any more time. They can just focus purely on site.
Yeah, the good thing though for Slime Belief is because Thomas has been able to save his life with this Azami, he's been able to apply Kiba Barrier after Kiba Barrier, now only just getting this long hallway wall down. There's just still so much defender utility to deal with, but it doesn't matter if Reapers just swings an angle that he was more than not welcome to. Uzi shutting down Stompin' all the way over by Skylight, and now you have Franklin Bands on Spiral Stairs alone. Uzi understanding that there is a player above on his Skylight. Vic trying to potentially catch a player off guard. Franklin, though, getting a lot of info and applying a lot of pressure. Vic just missing the head. He does see the player, but it's actually Thomas to shut him down. Zim also realizing that this Monty is trying to take space. Lou did eventually jump down those marble stairs, just trying to get some picks. Franklin with one of his own onto Thomas. Zim just trying to get a couple of shots. He does get the down onto Lou. Uzi is able to eventually finish it. Blue losing his life still. Aiden in a 1v2, 8 seconds on the board, doesn't have DPs, doesn't even know where Uzi is. Just so much to deal with and not enough time to do it. And Slime Belief, they find 2 rounds back to back to get an even defensive half.
I mean, again, it's just coming down to some guys making some really nice shots, alleviating a ton of pressure in a situation where they don't have a whole lot of room. It's frag or just be killed. They have to make those shots work. Uzi gets a nice shot onto Stompin, who's walking down that stock hallway. That gives them that free space to work down stock hallways, soda machines. They can go wherever now. They don't have to worry so much about a long angle being held by a player at Bandscoast. They can focus on the pure threat that is Monty in President's office and anybody else swinging into the site windows. That kind of limits the focus that Slime Belief has to work with, because now they can focus on, okay, well, now we have a guy directly in front of us in President's office. Now we can shut him down, just coordinate the flash over there, make sure that we really slow them down, and overall just get it down to it's a grudge fight for Bandscoast, because so far, what we've seen throughout this series so far is that when Bandscoast get into a situation where they have the man advantage, they can break apart these defenders, really separate them out. Slime Belief can't really do much, but when situations like that where they can get a little bit of that coordination, Slime Belief looks so much better, and they can come back from just about anything if they just have a little bit of help from each other.
Yeah, and watching Slime Belief's previous game, we talked a lot about how Bandscoast in previous qualifiers, even in Element 4 to an extent, were never really challenged on their fundamentals. And talking about a player like Thomas coming into a roster with young talent, adding just so much of those fundamentals, having so much experience for such a long time playing this game. And I'm pleasantly surprised that we are seeing Slime Belief do a great job of challenging these fundamentals, pushing Bandscoast to make very hard decisions, not allowing them to just walk into certain positions, get those kills completely uncontested. And we can see that Bandscoast, on a map that was absolutely their favorite, a map that they've dominated on, now is starting to lean into the favor somewhat of their opponent. We can already see that this defense, they're feeling the pressure of this attack. We're feeling the pressure of Slime Belief just clearing this control.
At least holding them back just a little bit longer. Early smoke bait from Aiden goes out. It's about to throw out a second one just to slow down that pace just a little bit more. They don't have a whole lot to take care of him. They have a couple of flashbangs to kind of blind him out, force his way down the stairs. But they need to get that server hatch open to make sure that if he does fall back, somebody has the cutoff on him on the server door stairs. But they just don't have the initiation to just take that gunfight. They're a little bit nervous about this, and he's just had the prime opportunity to swing out, take down Reapers. It's immediately traded, but look at that, just the pressure coming out from Bandscoast so early on, immediately retaken by Vic Vance, who's now walking down these blue stairs.
I absolutely love it. It's kind of one of those things where, like, if you're a team like Slime Belief that has that, fundamental PC competitive experience, you're not going to expect another player to swing because they shouldn't. Vic Vance had no info if there was an additional player that was going to be able to shut him down and immediately get the trade. He took that risk and was rewarded, and now you can see, because not only they haven't been able to clear out Vic Vance from this position, but because they're down a man, Thomas being able to eventually even it out, they still haven't cleared this position. They're going to eventually try and potentially wedge their way between, but it doesn't matter. Thomas tries to swing. Vic Vance shut him down. Zach even tries to go down below, but just gives Vic Vance his third in the round, and now it's Uzi all alone. He tries to go down for the swing, but is shut down in a phenomenal shutdown overall from Bandscoast in their very first defensive round.
I mean, just talk about the level of trust you have in your teammate, from Vic Vance just following up his teammates who's probably just communicated that, hey, I'm going to go for a very aggressive swing. I'm probably going to die here. Just retake it. Make sure that they can't retake it after I die. And he followed through on that. Slime Belief just did not even seem to remotely account for that was going to be a possibility. They saw the smoke swing out, got his refrag, and then was like, okay, well, that's probably blue stairs done. We're just not going to have to worry about that for the rest of the round. But Vic Vance says, no, you still need to clear me. You have to go through me if you want server control. Go for that default plant. And Slime Belief got a little sloppy. It seemed like Thomas just swung in, assuming that his teammate who was droning it server ahead of him had already cleared that position, and just immediately try to take that gunfight. Either he didn't know he was there, or he just tried to take that 50-50, try to win that out, and just hope he wins it. That's not a great recipe for success, and Slime Belief just did kind of look lackadaisical for a lot of that round. They looked scared to take these gunfights, and they really cost them in situations where they really needed to up that pressure because Vic Bands was just ready to take them all out.
Yeah, it is kind of curious because they didn't have that Capitao to apply additional pressure. They didn't have any nades to clear him from the position. And keep in mind, there was no shield there. It was, on paper, a relatively soft position, and because of that, an easy position for Slime Belief to clear out. And this is a factor that, you know, we've touched on about Bandscoast. Is not only do they have that mechanical skill, but they just have that cohesion, that team chemistry that not a lot of these T3, T4 teams have because they've been playing together for so long on console, for years at times, and they just have that team chemistry that even some pro league teams like SSG have because they've been playing for years, that these amateur teams don't have because these are pug stacks essentially. The Slime Belief in itself, even with those 2/5 of Garage Talks in itself, is a pug stack, and that is essentially, especially in these qualifiers and now leading into a main event for T3, that Bandscoast gets the upper advantage on their opponents.
All that long haul is going to be opened up. Lou is only able to bandit trick that one of those Selmas on the far right wall, so there is still going to be an angle for Slime Belief to kind of make sure that they can see anybody who's kind of playing around stock, playing around marble stairs. There's still the factor of Vic Bands just getting a nice shot onto Zim. He technically already did his job in the round, but immediately getting shut down like that when you're supposed to be on coverage duty is not going to help. Slime Belief kind of looking like they just don't have a whole lot of other options. They're just going to try to send Thomas up these lobby stairs. There's no other pressure to follow up with him. Vic Bands falling off just a little bit, but even more to hard cover, and the rest of his team follow behind him.
Speaking of no other options, there is no other hard breach operator on the board. No can openers, no Habana, no thermite, nothing. Zim was their only chance to get any of these hard walls open, and now this also forces Slime Belief to go for these very aggressive swings in the positions that they may not want to do. Aiden shutting down Reapers, stomping with another onto Zach, and it's just Thomas and Uzi all alone in a 2v5. Uzi is able to get one. Lou is eventually there to shut him down. It's just Thomas on the Monty all alone in a 1v4. There's not a whole lot he can do here. He might try to get his one, but it will fail. Lou getting a second, and Bandscoast having a phenomenal time to start off their defense.
I mean, what can he really do when Vic Bands just gets activated like that? He's taking fights that no man should ever win. That is the worst possible angle you could have onto that rappel, and he still wins it anyway. That's just ridiculous. And then he falls back to the rest of his teammates, allows Thomas on the Monty to kind of push up just that little bit further. But the rest, he has the confidence that the rest of his team has everything else locked down. Slime Belief try to spread out the resources, try to see if they can catch somebody off guard, find a gap in the defense. But Bandscoast seem to have everything under lock and key. There is nothing that they're not accounting for. They have players watching that square doorway. They have players watching stock. There's nothing that they don't have covered, and they're ready to shut down any of those solo plays, trying to find that little bit of a gap hit. And there's nothing else that Slime Belief can do. They went for the desperation play of just sending everybody elsewhere and try to see if they can find picks, and everybody got shut down. So Bandscoast, all they have to do is refocus their pressure over towards President's office, take down Thomas, and that is just round done. Slime Belief really need to change something up because they just keep letting one player dictate a very big portion of the round, and they can't do anything about the rest of the team, Goose.
You spoke about changing. You know what helps a team change how they play in a map? A timeout. But Slime Belief, they took that after just 3 rounds. Sure, they were able to eventually get 2 rounds after the very first, and then get an even half. But when you simply cannot attack and you don't have that timeout to just slow the momentum, give yourself that time to talk, it really turns difficult. I don't want to necessarily say that they wasted it because they did get some success out of it, but again, we're seeing that it is really needed yet again, and they just have no answer. Zach, though, is able to find one, and DeFranklin somehow finding his way into Archives, just making his way, wedging in between this defense, finding a gap, finding an opening, the one they needed. Uzi also shutting down Stomp, and now 2 very important picks. Zach with a double in the round, and somehow A minute into the round, it's a 2v5. Now a 1v5 as Zim finds another. Everything is falling apart, but going completely right for Slime Belief. It's Vic Bands. He went huge last round. He's going to have to go huge again, but it just will not be. Thomas shuts him down and gives not only Slime Belief their very first, but a flawless at that.
I mean, I'm just wondering how Zach Killa was able to sneak his way all the way up those blue stairs directly into Archives, because Franklin was the first point of contact. Actually, looking at the replay just a little bit ago, you moved over to Teller, so he was completely looking the other way probably as soon as Zach walked in. He had no real idea that he was walking in right behind him. There's no Capcan traps to get his technical trade, quote unquote. So that's just a very unfortunate timing from Franklin. Not really much that he can do because there's not a whole lot of other information given the operator lineup that they had. There would have been maybe a bulletproof watching that's staff double door, but after Zach moves past that so quickly, there's no other real info other than square cam. So you happen to rely upon a lot of the rest of your setup to try to feed you that info, but just Zach seemed to find the one Achilles heel in that entire lineup and just completely free Archives hit, and then everything else kind of fumbles around them. Bandscoast try to desperately find a pick. They try to get aggressive and try to get that equalizer, but they just kept dying one after another, and there's not a whole lot that they can do in that scenario.
Another factor that will continue to have an effect throughout the entirety of these rounds, we talked about how every player on Bandscoast is almost equally individually mechanical capable. You can see that, Aiden having 7 and 6, Stomp and 8 kills, and then Vic Bands also having 8 kills. And then you look over at Slime Belief, sure, Zach had a phenomenal round, but aside from that, Uzi, the only person in double digits, and the only two people even close to him is Zim and Reapers, who only have 5 kills. You're kind of, in a lot of these rounds, aside from the previous, relying on Uzi to be the spearhead. And in rounds where we don't have that, we've seen that Slime Belief are not able to find success. And now, going into a bomb site where you're going to have to clear these positions, especially with such an extended hold, it's just going to be absolutely so important. Zim trying to get aggressive very early on, but Vic is more than prepared, goes for an aggressive swing, but is not punished for it.
But this is a big point of emphasis for Slime Belief. They want to take the server control as fast as possible. Get the swing onto Vic Bands, shut him down. Now server's completely theirs for the taking. Everybody else from Bandscoast is either upstairs or so far back they cannot take this recontest to get that refrag. So now Slime Belief have a minute 50 to start opening up these walls. Franklin finds one on the roam onto Uzi. That's good. That's the Dokkaebi out of the way, so they don't have any information to provide Reapers. If he starts to sneak up, he's just going to have to face check this blind. He's just waiting for anybody to regress, take that garage control back.
Yeah, the problem here for Bandscoast is they're not aware. They have no inkling that he is in this position. Aiden swings unknowingly and is punished for it, but eventually Lou is able to get the refrag, clear that position, and give yet another point to deny this plant. Thomas trying to get the plant down. Franklin goes for the swing, but is downed. No one applying any pressure. I don't even know if they're aware. Lou goes for an aggressive swing, is able to kill Zach, but essentially a 2v2 with Franklin on the board. Stompin is going to be able to revive him. Zim and Thomas just have to wait for these swings. Two players, a collateral at that, and 3 for Zim to finish it off in Slime Belief. They lost 2 in a row to start off their attack, but they get 2 of their own, and now we are tied up 5-5.
And just talk about, just talk about a completely different look for Slime Belief these last 2 rounds. They look like they have a little bit of confidence behind them. Now that they got that 1 round on the attack out of the way, they just take up the pressure, try to take servers as fast as possible, and they take down Vic Bands. Don't want to get slowed down by the smoke bays later in the round. Don't want to have what happened previously happen to them again. So they take that pressure quickly. They take that map control, get it away from Bandscoast as quickly as possible. Realizing that there's nobody else really to help him out, he's completely isolated on his own. Either a really nice drone coming in early in the round, fed them that info that Bandscoast is primarily over towards open area. There's not much that they can do to help Vic Bands out. So they take that 3v1 gunfight onto him, take him down quickly, and then open up those walls, take care of those goalie canisters, and somehow, even with one popped right behind Thomas's back, he's able to get a plant down, taking almost no damage. That must have been what Bandscoast was thinking, is that, oh, we've got the Vulcan canister. popped. There's no way that they can play it on default. We have that covered already. So nobody really thought to kind of take that re-aggression, try to move up a little bit faster, to try to make sure that Thomas can't get it down. But they had no idea, Goose, that is even going down because, well, you popped the Vulcan canister, you did your job, right? That should shut down a plant attempt.
And again, we're starting to see in these rounds, obviously, it's not really having a huge effect. It's these small little mistakes, small misreads coming out from Bandscoast that is really just being shown, is kind of exposing a little bit of their inexperience. Obviously, these are relatively experienced players in their, console span of their playtime, but in this high level of competitive PC Siege, this is still something relatively new to them, especially for Stompin, just only starting PC Siege, I believe, not even 2 months ago. And we're going to see a lot of these growing pains. And obviously, having that team chemistry, having that cohesion is going to be able to allow for them to work out a lot of these smaller problems relatively quickly. And Slime Belief doing a phenomenal job of just spotting those gaps and making sure that not only do they take advantage of it, but they don't wait. As soon as they see a gap, as soon as they see something that they can take that will add value to the round, they do it almost instantly, making sure that they don't give Bandscoast the time to retake that position.
Reaper's actually getting a drone ahead of him from Thomas, feeding him all this information that what's up ahead of him is completely clear. Possibly just trying to see if there's anybody down below from Bandscoast that he needs to get out of the way, so that way he can easily get in, use those death marks from down below, find somebody who's just kind of sitting in from soft cover below. But now he just has the all clear, knows that Archives is going to be fast for the taking. Now there's nobody from Bandscoast to stop him. He can get a death mark track onto somebody just sitting in a hard corner. Looks like Stompin may be the first one that he may go for if they get the intel that he's going to be here. But ultimately, it's just a matter of when he actually sends that out.
So far, relatively slow round for Slime Belief. Just trying to work these external walls and external positions, getting a little bit of that additional info. You can see that Vic Bands, the only thing stopping him from dying is going to be those zombie barricades, but with a tracker from below, even still difficult to get stopped, and eventually they are able to get the down. A nade out from Reapers, more than likely, but it doesn't though. Still somehow alive, a nade almost will kill Franklin though, but Stompin still being able to be revived. A lot of pressure. Reaper's still holding this position below. Surely Bandscoast are aware of this and they will be able to make out safely.
I mean, how did Stompin even survive through that entire engagement? And now Lou finds one onto Reapers. That's the downstairs pressure now gone. And Aiden finds one onto Thomas. It's all falling apart for Slime Belief. Zach Hill is able to find one onto Janitor player, but he still has to take care of that player over towards Stock. Takes care of the cam, so no more information from Bandscoast to find the information onto him. Now he needs to just try to find at least one more to make it at least a 3v2. Still a very tough fight because of all these positions that Bandscoast are now still locking down. Needs help from his teammate Uzi, who's making his way up marble stairs. But he's going to have to take care of this. But he's taking care of the stock pressure instead. Lou has the trade, and it's now Uzi all alone in a 1v3 scenario, and they know exactly where he is. Has to punch out the barbed wire. It's going to give away the sound info to Bandscoast. They're just going to play this passively, not overextend themselves. And Slime Belief threatening to go down onto match point on Bandscoast map pick. He's just going to have to try to see if he can find something, but he can't find anything. Stompin has the shutdown as he starts to swing on in, and Bandscoast put themselves onto map point.
A phenomenal answer back from Bandscoast using that timeout to its most. And I think it is a little bit funny that you have Slime Belief and then you have Bandscoast who just take out their timeout and they get to talk to an SI champion. I mean, you just don't really see that a lot in
It's kind of unfair,
T3.
don't you think?
Honestly, yeah, it is a little bit unfair. And like if I win 2 back-to-back rounds and then my opponent's like, okay, we're just gonna go talk to Merc real quick and see how we can beat you guys. It's a little bit unfair. But also, it's not kind of a sense where Merc is turning a roster that has no experience, no accolades, or any skill whatsoever to speak of. There's just so much behind this Bandscoast roster. And for a lot of people who are more familiar with the PC side of things, they didn't really fully understand it. They kind of think of console players as just all run and gun, but still having a lot of fundamentals, more than a lot of people would give them credit for. And even being tested quite a bit. Probably one of their most tested series they have played so far with Stompin on the roster, and still on match point, just one round away from finishing it off and getting their very first win in the Crucible.
I mean, just even going back as far as their Element 4 run, where they went 2-3 but started off 0-2, you still see so much development, even though this is a tight series and they're clearly making quite a few mistakes. But you still see the development from Bandscoast. They're still learning a lot. With each series, they gain much more information to know how they play better with each other and just how they play in terms of just strategy. Cool. Zim's going to take down Lou, just playing a little bit too over-aggressive, it would seem, just in the middle of the bomb site. And now, it's going to have to just be down to the rest of the Bandscoast, who are running out of a lot of room. Zach Hillett just takes the free space and accidentally drops into open, but he already did a ton of damage. He took down the stock player, and now 3v4 for Slime Belief, or sorry, Bandscoast, and they're having to find some way to equalize this back.
The good thing for Bandscoast is we're seeing a little bit of a reset coming out from Slime Belief, rotating a couple of their positions, but Reaper's finding a way to the bomb site, finding a kill and a second on Aiden. We've talked so much about how Bandscoast were on match point, but it doesn't matter, because now, Slime, they find themselves now venturing their way into overtime.
I mean, we talked about it. Slime Belief were trying to look for any gaps in the defense, and they spotted just about all of them, dudes. I mean, Zach worked his way into stock with a player actively on the keep-up area behind the desk, and somehow still finds a kill completely uncontested, and then drops down on accident, but enabled the rest of his team to continue to find that empty space that was presented by Bandscoast, who just completely got dismantled on that top floor. There's hardly any real presence on that first floor for them to really stop anybody else from walking in. Reaper's, after getting that first kill, sneaks his way into lobby and gets into the bomb site himself and finds the player on the bomb site itself. And all he has to do is just watch for the coverage onto the player that they already got the call out is in open. So it's just about locking things down, taking the empty space, and making sure that Bandscoast can't punish you for it, because ultimately, that's just been your biggest struggle, is when you get locked down by Bandscoast, you allow them to kind of get back into these rounds. That's when Slime Belief really struggle, but if they're able to find gaps like that, that's just really tough for Bandscoast to come back in these rounds.
Yeah, it really is, and we talked about how even Bandscoast as a roster is, and sure, that does have a lot of fantastic factors to it, but when you have so much success as a team, when you struggle, you also struggle as a team. And we can see, even with relatively all players having consistent, stat lines, 9-8, Stompin, Franklin, 7-6, Aiden getting above that 10 kill fresh mark, we're seeing a lot of these gaps that are being spotted are kind of a continuation throughout the entire map. They're consistent gaps that are being spotted by Slime Belief, and it's a situation where because they don't have an answer, every single other player on this Bandscoast roster, especially on the defense, is relatively struggling with it.
A little bit of a late reinforcement from Thomas, just getting that small office hatch out of the way, leaving his only teammate Zim, who's just going to be solo on the open area, just trying to slow things down for as long as possible. Bandscoast has the information onto him. It's just a matter of getting the kill onto him or forcing it back to the bomb site, getting that space completely uncontested. That way they can start to work on these hatches, get into a position just where they can open this up. They've done a ton of damage to him, and now he's going to finally make his way back. Now it's a full 5-player man hold on site for Slime Belief. Now it's all up to Bandscoast to just try to rip open this site from up above, try to open up as many avenues as they can, because minute 30, there's still plenty of time to do it, but they have to use this effectively.
And another round where Bandscoast are given a plethora of time to just build up their execution. The entire win factor of this round is going to come down to just Bandscoast being able to deal with these extended players on the bomb site like Reapers inside of Garage, and just getting this timing right, making sure that they can get a planter into a safe position. You can see just how much of an outreach Slime Belief have across the entire bomb site, having even a player, that being Zim, inside of gold. And there's just always going to be a point, if Bandscoast does attack, there's going to be a player there. They are going to have Stompin with those Grimbees. We'll add a little bit of extra intel, using it already hopefully should find out Oozing. That's exactly what they will do, pushing him out of that position, getting a little bit of a ping. Eventually it will wear off. Reaper with the very first onto Aiden. Stompin, though, is able to shut down Uzi with that smoke canister, completely just trapping him in. They know exactly where he is. He flashed onto him, no drop just yet, but as I say, that Franklin is there. A swing from Thomas is able to shut him down, and still, Stompin just completely exited out of this entire round, but Vic Bands and Lou go huge. It's all up to Zim, but it's Vic Bands with 2 to shut down the round. It doesn't matter if you have Stompin locked up. There's going to be another player that pops up like whack-a-mole, and Bandscoast, yet again, just 1 round away from finishing it off on Bank.
In a round where it could have been anybody's game if a gunfight just goes a little bit differently, Slime Belief, despite having Bandscoast find a little bit of an opening just in the weaker portion of their defense where there's not nearly as much utility watching for that coverage in both Vault and Elevator, they still made it a tough fight, constantly having to trade each other out and making Bandscoast really have to work for this take. But even still, just due to the fact that they overexpose themselves in certain situations, just made it to where Bandscoast, all they have to do is find that kill, find that space, and then they could take the rest of the site. Just makes it to where Bandscoast don't have to do nearly as much work, and that's just been kind of a common theme throughout this entire series, is that Slime Belief aren't really playing to their strengths, not playing around what they already have together. They just need to play around each other, play around their setup, but constantly overexposing themselves, making themselves play in dangerous positions, trying to win these 50 gunfights, puts themselves into a situation where Bandscoast just letting their gunners fly, take this space quickly, and make sure that they can win every single gunfight.
A very important round, not only because Bandscoast are just 1 round away from winning it, but overall relatively somewhat aggressive lineup coming out from Slime Belief. A lot of utility meant to clear. We can already see Aiden trying to meet not only what he thought was going to be a player, but only, just for now, a drone. Thomas with Diffuser will back up that drone relatively quickly, but Aiden just throwing out a smoke bait and just running right away, giving up that control, essentially putting up a little bit of a trap. Vic Bands a roam on the top floor with Vigil, something that we haven't seen just yet from this basement defense from Bandscoast.
And nobody seems to be aware of this play coming in. For the moment, Zach Hill seems to be the only one who has a clear idea. He just took a Boss G shot to the chest, is able to survive from this, but now they know Vic Bands is all the way upstairs. They know there's a single roamer somewhere lurking around the map, but they don't have the information exactly where he is. Dokkaebi Call comes out, trying to play off that information, but there's nobody close enough to kind of play off of this. Zim coming in from Square, there's 2 players, but they're not close enough to take down Vic Bands. He's just going to waste so much time up here, Goose.
You also have Thomas, who I hope he's not going for a plant here, because he has no support whatsoever, and that's an easy swing. You can see that he is trying to deal with this single wall with the mirror relatively early on, just trying to pick up a little bit of the slack so they don't have to deal with it as a team much later on. But again, still not clearing out Vic Bands. It looks like that they do have Uzi up there trying to deal with them. Zach trying to take this position over inside of Garage, but this time around, it isn't vacant from Bandscoast. Franklin with a shield, but it's Uzi to eventually, after 2 minutes, shut down Vic Bands on the top floor. But he's done his job. Sure, he didn't get a kill. He did lose his life, but he's wasted 2 minutes. Reapers trying to potentially catch someone off on a road save. But again, it's just Slime Belief waiting for Bandscoast to make the very first move. They are going to be able to get rid of that barbed wire, but a majority of this round will fall down to Thomas trying to get this plant down over in A-bomb, but with still 1 smoke canister, 2 of those Vulcan canisters right by the door. It doesn't matter! Thomas is going to run right through the site, try to apply pressure very early on. Not exactly what you want to be doing with the diffuser. Lou's able to find 1, but Zim's able to get the drop down, and he gets 2, putting him in a 2v4. Boxing out Stompin. Stompin is able to shut him down. Uzi's there to get the refrag. Now it's all up to Franklin in a 1v3, getting shot from behind, and it's Zach to shut him down. And we're going the distance. We're going to maximum overtime. 7-7. The game's not over yet. And now Bandscoast switching over to the attack.
And despite having wasted so much time trying to find Vic Bands all the way up top, I think Slime Belief just kind of came to a realization that if they just continue to play as slow as they were in that round, they're going to lose. So they up the pressure, send Thomas in, sprint straight at the mirror window. Because like you said, there's 2 Vulcan canisters that were still up. There was still a smoke canister in pocket. So they have to get past all of that. They have to get up in the face of Bandscoast, make sure that anybody who's just sitting in a very hard tucked position now has to come out, swing that aggressively so they can take down Thomas, who's very up close to the smoke. He has no real other help other than Zim dropping down the side hatch, getting 2 kills and alleviating so much pressure, especially on that red hull. Now it allows Thomas to get into a safer position and to possibly go for a plant, but because of so much coverage they had set up throughout that entire round, Slime Belief got into several cutoff positions that they watched those coverage. There's only 1 player left in Garage, and they already have that accounted for by just sending that Twitch through Garage and having him kind of be the backstab in the very end of that round. Very smart kind of readjustment by Slime Belief in a situation where they went any slower, it probably would have been a Bandscoast victory.
Yeah. Serious, I hope you're ready for a very long night. This is now, out of my 3 games, my 3rd max overtime matchup. So, if the trend continues, we're going to have quite a bit of a long night, but this won't be too much longer for both teams. The very last round, a lot of defender utility coming out from Slime Belief here, having both the Aruni, even having Thomas and the Castle coming out from Reapers. A lot for Beast, or Bandscoast rather, to deal with very early on. Lucky for them, though, they are going to be able to get rid of some of the utility, even though it did miss the mute. That Flores drone will not be able to clear that shield. More than likely just being able to get rid of that mute. Now going to be able to get rid of this position, but this is still not only time, but also attacking utility being wasted.
It's just a matter of ultimate resources. How much are the Bandscoast having to develop? Try to clear out the stock position. Ace Selma comes in to open up that wall, just dodging a couple bullets, whizzing by his head. Does force Uzi to back off just a little bit further, having to play a little bit closer to his teammate on the marble stairs. Zach Hilla not very far behind, but nobody on that long angle. Nobody's opened up elevator, so they don't have anybody to really lock down this hallway. It's still going to be a tough fight for Bandscoast if they want to pressure this area of the map. Franklin is going to have to do a lot of this grunt work, try to get over towards Janitor. But now they're at least starting to set things up for the late round as they start to open up that square wall, give themselves options in the late round as they start to push Slime Belief back.
A phenomenal play from Aiden bringing out the IQ is going to give them the info that there is going to be an active Echo drone very early on. A lot of pressure over into this Janitor's position. Bandscoast doing everything in their power. A nade, a player on those CO repels, and Franklin with the Monty shield just trying to meet Zim. But as of right now, not a whole lot of pressure being put on directly to these players. Franklin just trying to find a way, entertaining the idea if he just wants to go around this mute, try and get something. The nade will force Zim out of his position, but no one's there to shut him down, so he can be able to just retake that position. Does lose quite a bit of his health, but aside from that, nothing else. Another swing coming out from Lou, trying to get rid of Uzi, and that's exactly what he does. Shutting him down, getting the entry pick in the round, and an ace applying even more pressure onto Zim. His position, his time is waning. Lou is able to shut him down, but Zach is there for the refrag. Almost gets another one on his Stompin'. Goes for the ego swing, goes for the ego. Chow is able to find Stompin', though. Another player, that being Aiden, does shut down Zach. Try to potentially find the flank. There's not going to be a flank, a down from him. And out of all of that gunfire, it's going to be Slime Belief. Thomas, the IGL, the old man himself, shutting it down and knocking Bandscoast off of their tower, off of their streak of bank. And finally, that challenge that we've been talking so much about finally has met Bandscoast.
I mean, talk about just knowing exactly what your win condition is and knowing where the pressure is being established by Bandscoast in that situation. Thomas retaking that point in Janitor Closet after Zim gets taken down by Lou, hopping in that stock window, immediately retakes that, and that was the pivotal turning around point for Slime Belief because they were pushing so far beyond themselves. They didn't really have much else to really stop that plant if he didn't take that position, just due to the fact that he's just right there. that he can take down the planter, he can take down anybody else who's having to now scramble to retake that position, and just absolutely superbly done by Thomas in such a dire scenario where it seemed like Bandscoast had everything going for them.
Well, I feel like it is safe to say at this point that whenever Goose is on cast, the game is going to max OT. I mean, come on, 3 out of 3 games, it's gotta be you, right?
It really's got to be. Going into this matchup, I spoke about how, no matter a win or a loss, this was going to be an improvement match for Bandscoast, and it's exactly as I predicted. Maximum overtime, being tested on every front, even if Slime Belief aren't going to be on the same caliber as maybe, MXPL team or, JJ and Co. With Mr. B now in addition, it's still going to be a test in a group that is very contested, even though you do have teams like 1HP that, haven't looked as great. It is still going to be an absolute dogfight, and I think this is one of those must-lose games that will force Bandscoast to just eventually grow as a team overall.
Yeah, for sure. It is super helpful as a team to lose to a better team because they will expose your weaknesses and it really gives you that growth opportunity. And I think that's what Bandscoast needed tonight to kind of push them towards that next step, kind of get them ready for the next stage and everything that's waiting for them. I mean, kind of just looking at the play-by-play of this game, it started with Slime Belief down when they took their timeout, being at 1-2, which kind of brought them to a very even 3-3 half. And then from there, it felt pretty even. We went to 5-5 when Bandscoast took their timeout. So first of all, it's rare to see both timeouts coming in a game, so even longer of a match for you, Goose.
Yeah.
Honestly, Sirius, can you give me any idea as to why Slime Belief was able to kind of take the victory at the end there?
I mean, I think honestly, even though they used their timeout so early on, the second time through for a lot of just either the executes on the attack or defense, whatever they saw second time around from Bandscoast, they knew exactly how to counter that because they've already seen it before, so they know the weaknesses that were presented to them. So it's just a matter of taking advantages of those weaknesses, finding those gaps, finding just those little pressure points that we know how they're going to play this time around. We just need to kind of counteract our strategy, kind of find that why am I struggling to find the word for it? Just that wedge to kind of get in and take care of those points, because they honestly, like you said, they were down so early, but just after finally seeing a couple of things from Bandscoast, they were just able to adapt so well towards the very end of that game.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to the kind of more seasoned team, I guess, is that they have that ability to kind of spot out these weaknesses in a newer team, and they can kind of figure out where to apply that pressure, like you were saying. Kind of looking at the individual players, from my perspective, it really looked like it was very even across the board. But Goose, was there anyone that really stuck out to you on either team, for good or for worse?
I think, it was kind of a flip-flop. The early half for Bandscoast, you had Aiden do a phenomenal job, and then after that, you eventually had other players like Franklin start to step up. And I think even the same thing, obviously, you had the mainstays like Zim and Uzi. Had an additional couple of players make up for that. And I think it was a kind of series where you had both teams so evenly matched up, obviously an 8-7 at that, both teams being forced to take their timeouts. And it's kind of a situation where it was a back and forth, both on both teams' play styles, their overall skill sets, and both just overall teams just doing every bit of work that is needed.
Yeah, kind of going off of that thought, do you think that since Slime Belief was playing a doubleheader, do you think that impacted their performance in this game? Do you think it might have been more one-sided if they'd been fresh? Or do you think we would have seen a similar outcome regardless?
I think just getting that warm-up, just getting yourself into the game. Obviously, both teams, 1HP and Bandscoast, play completely differently. I don't necessarily think 1HP prepared them for that matchup, but it doesn't hurt to get that warm-up. You don't really need that warm-up scrim. But yeah, I think it's just something that really doesn't hurt.
All right, well, we are going to be taking a quick break before our last game of the season. Or, not of the season, of the games tonight. I'm trying to figure out who it is. It was not pulled up. It'll be Team Cruelty. Yeah, Cruelty versus Shreds. So that is who you guys can expect to see when we are back after this short break.